Hello and welcome to The Rate Stuff, your essential guide to all things mortgage. I'm Jack Izzard.
And I'm Peter Stimson.
And welcome back to our studio. We're in the studio this week, of course, after our adventure in Manchester last time. Thank you to all of those of you who liked and subscribed to the show. We do appreciate it. It enables us to keep bringing you the show each time. And Peter, we've got a packed show today. In fact, during the editorial meeting today, Peter, you were grinning, almost an impish grin.
Well, wouldn't quite go that far.
And why are you so pleased with yourself?
We've got a huge amount of data in today's show. In fact, more data than a NASA spreadsheet almost.
Peter loves his data. So we've got lots of data about what's going on in the mortgage market. And we've also got some celebrations. No party poppers, I'm afraid, but we are saying happy first birthday to the government. Yes, July the 4th marks 12 months since the landslide Labour victory, and we will be running the rule over how they've done and how the mortgage market has changed. Stay with us for the rate stuff. No base rate decisions to talk about this week, although we should do a little flex for Peter. You absolutely called it right last time. He correctly predicted that the Bank of England would hold the base rate unchanged, so gold star.
That wasn't hard, to be fair. I think everyone called that one.
Take the win, Peter, right, take the win. Anyway, we have since then had a couple of interesting bits of data from the Bank of England. It confirmed that in May, the levels of new mortgage lending increased for the first time this year, and the interest rate, the average interest rate on new mortgages in May fell to its lowest level since April 2023. So, glimmers of light there, Peter. More lending going on, rates slowly coming down. You happy?
Yeah, I mean, the market has been picking up gradually. Obviously, we had the stamp duty cut off in April, which obviously pushed transactions forward and picked the market back up. I mean, swaps have been coming down in the sort of last 10 days or so. Been coming down for a few reasons, and it gets a little bit complicated for the reasons why. I mean, obviously, Andrew Bailey in a recent speech hinted that we could see a rate cut in August, which is perhaps bringing it slightly further forward than the market was perhaps expecting. That's one reason. We've obviously got stuff going on in the US. The Fed has hinted that rates could fall slightly faster than expected because of the impact of tariffs not coming through, and obviously US consumer data in May was much poorer than expected. Consumer spending in the US actually fell in May by 0.1%. So that's kind of hinting that the US market or economy is cooling slightly faster than expected. Obviously, we've got stuff going on in the UK. We've already had Labour sort of struggling to get its welfare reforms through. That's obviously, putting more pressure on the government in terms of, spending, whether it's going to have to sort of put cuts through in other areas or raise taxes or, raise borrowing. So there's also sort of pressures pushing through onto the economy in the UK as well. So that's all hinting that the UK economy is also starting to cool, and that's pushing through onto swap rates. So swap rates are gradually falling in that regard. So that's all kind of sort of pushing rates down, but there are a couple of sort of problems on the horizon or potential sort of issues on the horizon. We've obviously still got the UK inflation issue. Inflation in the UK is pretty stubborn. It's still at 3.4%. So we need to see where the next print comes in.
Yeah.
And we've still got the big issue in the US with Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill. We weren't going to get through an episode without mentioning Donald, obviously.
It's impossible.
It's impossible. He's rumoured to be, when the bill goes through, he's adding around $5 billion to the US debt, and that could have a big impact on US Treasury costs, which could obviously play across ultimately to, what happens in the UK swap markets.
Yeah, no, inflation is still the elephant in the room, not the orangutan, the elephant in the room, and it is problematic, isn't it? So very interesting to see how clear Andrew Bailey was in that speech earlier this week about the need to cut sooner rather than later. That sort of suggests that he is going to just look through inflation, keep cutting now. And do you think that there could possibly be 2 more base rate cuts this year as a result?
I mean, swaps now, UK 2-year SONIA is looking around 363, 5 years looking around 365, as you can see from the swap graph we're putting up. So potentially looking at 2 cuts this year now. That's possible. It really depends on inflation and a load of other things going on. As you can see from the graph, we put it up for the last year. You can see the volatility in swaps. It's distinctly possible, but lots of things can happen. It's a very, very moving feast, as we've seen.
Okay, so some encouraging signs on the mortgage side of the coin. However, we had a bit of a red flag earlier this week from the Nationwide. It published its monthly house price index, and that showed that average prices in June fell at their sharpest rate, month on month, for more than 2 years. Now, we had a pretty good start to the year in terms of house prices. This sounds like a very sudden about face. Should we be worried?
Personally, I think no, not yet, because obviously it's 1 month's data. It's data from the Nationwide, and it kind of goes against the Bank of England data you mentioned at the beginning, where housing transactions were the best in May since they've been all year. So not at this stage. If it becomes a trend and we see it through Rightmove data, Zoopla data, Land Reg data, yes, then I think we should be a bit concerned. But I think there is a general issue still with affordability. House prices are going to be constrained whilst the LTI cap still remains in place. One graph we're sticking up now is house price change in London since 2005 going through to today, and I'm a little bit indebted to Kate Faulkner for pointing this out. So what we're showing is the change in house prices for detached houses, flats and RPI since 2006. And you can actually see that in London, it's relatively trended the same. So basically, RPI matches house price change over that period. There's a little bit of a red herring on this because obviously RPI shot up massively in 2020, obviously when we went into COVID and prices went up. So there's a kind of an issue around, how affordable is our prices and things generally after obviously the big price shock. But the second graph we're putting up now actually shows what happens if you go back to 2000. The house prices in the period 2000 to 2006 actually doubled. So when you look at graphs and you look at house prices in a period going back 25 years, you can really see how far prices have gone out of the reach of ordinary people when you look at RPI in that regard. What we've also done is put in where the LTI cap came in 2024. So the challenge really is, what do you do about the LTI cap? If you take the LTI cap away and you don't increase housing supply, what happens to house prices? If you push house prices up still further, is that just going to mean that house prices become just generally more unaffordable to people without additional supply? So that's kind of the challenge, the FCA, the PRA, and the market in general is facing.
Yes, so changing that LTI cap isn't going to be a silver bullet. That alone is not going to turn things around.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back it's my long way of saying it kind of goes back to the Nationwide data in the sense that, house prices really are going to struggle to get much further forward where affordability is still constrained.
Yeah,
but then,
and 1 month's fall in house prices is not suddenly going to make things affordable for people.
No, it's still not really going to change much really at the moment.
I think the key here is going to be supply, and that leads us on to one of the things that we will be marking the government against. Because if you remember, Peter, supply, builders, not blockers, remember that?
Yes.
Stay with us as we put the government to the test on its first birthday. So we can just crack on, Peter, yeah. No, I'm determined to do it. I'm going to do this cards thing if it kills me, Peter.
All right, okay. I'm sure it'll work. It'll be fine.
Right, hello. So we're going to talk about the government and its 1 year anniversary. And here we go. Let's take you through a year in base rate. So when they took over in July 2024, we were at that. And now, here we go, count them, the cuts. Hope these are right, Peter.
Okay.
And today we're at a base rate of 4.25%.
Yes.
So we have come down a full percentage point. Government can't really take credit for that, though, can it?
No, because the Bank of England is independent. So,
okay, let's score the government on something else then. What can they take credit for? What has gone well in its first year?
Well, I think if we look at what the government pledged, they were obviously pledging to build 1.5 million homes in the first 5 years. And they've put a number of policies, or they've tried to put a number of policies in place. So if we look at what they have done, they've obviously put an apprentice scheme in place to increase the number of builders. So that's positive. So they're looking at training 5,000 new apprentices on the building side of things. So that's positive. On the positive side, on social housing, there's 39 billion now pledged for social housing over the next 10 years. So that's obviously very positive. Not quite sure how many houses that's actually going to build, because it depends whether you're building housing for rent, affordable housing, or shared ownership. My rough calculation, that's around 300,000 new homes. Could be more, could be less, depending where you build them and what you build, obviously. So that's obviously very positive. The government's clearly on a mission to get things done. So there's obviously new legislation going to remove a lot of the red tape around planning and things like that.
Well, that was very much central to their builders, not blockers campaign. Promise,
absolutely. And everyone's got to remember that we've had 40 years of not building enough homes. So, the stuff around homes hasn't just occurred. It's 40 years with 3 million homes short. So, you're not going to turn the oil tanker in the space of a year or even 5 years. This is a long-term project that, you're going to have to embark on. So, we can't really mark them and score them on a year. We can only judge them on the start of, what is going to be a long-term project. So that's the positive stuff. They're making a good start. The bits that are probably missing is really, the mortgage guarantee scheme. That was part of the government election manifesto.
And where is it?
Exactly. It's not seen anything, not heard anything. The commitment was to have a long-term mortgage guarantee scheme in place. Not seen that. LISAs. LISAs are probably not really fit for purpose, or they're not really fitting in very well with a lot of people now.
Yeah.
A lot of people are cashing them in early. Don't really work very well in London because obviously the limit's too low for London and lots of the southeast, so they need reform. Leasehold reforms coming in for a little bit of stick, although give the government a bit of due. It is going ahead, it's just taking a lot of time to work on that side of things.
Well, they're fighting some very entrenched vested interests there, aren't they?
Yes, you've got the Grosvenor estate sort of appealing that it's against their vested interests, that customers have the right to not have leasehold going forward. So there's a lot of stuff that's going through at the moment and going to take a lot of time. So if we were doing an analogy, and maybe not the best analogy, it's a bit like England men's football team qualifying for the World Cup.
Oh, yeah.
You're going in with lots of enthusiasm. You're all kind
of
huge thinking,
optimism, misplaced enthusiasm.
Yeah, we're going into the group stage and we've had a 0-0 draw with Albania. It's kind of a bit like that,
right,
maybe.
okay. Yeah.
But obviously,
In a minute, Peter, you're going to say, "Oh, it's a game of two halves, Jack."
Well, not like that, but we've got to look ahead, and we can get out the group stage quite easily. We can go on this run. We can get through to the sort of the finals, the semi-finals, that kind of thing. So we're all kind of judging them on 1 year when this is kind of a 5-10 year project. Let's be honest.
So do I take it, Peter, that you're almost saying cut them some slack? It hasn't
cut
been
them
too
a bit
bad.
of slack. Cut them a bit of slack. I mean, they're enthusiastic. They're looking to get stuff done, which is perhaps more than you could say of the previous government.
Yeah, okay. Well, early days yet. I will say it has been a pretty miserable week for the government. That humbling with the rebellion over the welfare reforms. Ironically, we were talking about costs. That may well add to their costs, because £5 billion they were hoping to save with those welfare reforms. Now they're back to square one there. That's probably going to lead to more tax rises in the budget in autumn, isn't it?
It's almost certainly is. Rachel's run out of fiscal headroom already. And the other thing we will say about, if you need to build more houses, it costs money somewhere down the line. And money is this one thing this government doesn't have. And it's not just this government, it would be any government. 3 million houses you need to build.
That's a heck of a target.
It's a heck of a target. And it costs money somewhere for house builders, reform, whatever way you look at it, money's got to come from somewhere.
Okay, so far, so okay.
Okay, I think is probably what we'd say.
Okay, well, given the week that Keir Starmer has had, he would probably take that as a birthday present. So 1 year in, we will, of course, chart the progress of the government, and above all, we will chart every twist and turn of the mortgage market, because that's what we do here on The Rate Stuff. Thanks again to all of you for watching, for liking and subscribing. We really appreciate it. We'll be back next time with more updates on the mortgage market. Thank you for watching The Rate Stuff.